A man with deep brown eyes, wearing a blue uniform, walks into a small room and sits opposite me. He looks older than his 48 years. Thin, tired. We are in a camp for prisoners of war in western Ukraine, not far from Lviv. And a man fought in Ukraine as part of the Russian army. But he's not Russian. He's an ethnic Uzbek from the Osh region in southern Kyrgyzstan, a Kyrgyz citizen. He's also one of more than 3,000 men from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan who signed contracts with the Russian army, according to estimates by Хочу жить, I Want to Live, an initiative of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. How did they end up fighting someone else's war? And what motivated them? What happens to them once they are captured? This is The Unlikely Mercenaries. Central Asians fighting Russia's war. Hi, my name is Agnieszka Pikulicka and this is Turan Tales audio feature, bringing you fascinating stories from Central Asia, made possible by the International Press Institute. If you like what you hear, support us with a monthly subscription at turantales.substack.com/subscribe. Enjoy the story! Every day in Alik's life resembles the next. Since he was transferred to the camp, he wakes up before dawn for the morning prayer at 6 a.m. The Ukrainian gods gave him the Quran, and he prays 5 times a day, like a good Muslim.
I can read namaz. No one's stopping us. I'm grateful to them. Nobody says anything. Nobody raises a hand against us. And they could. We are mercenaries. We came here. We invaded Ukraine. And it's our fault.
After prayer, Alik and the other prisoners go for breakfast, prepared by other inmates. They bake their own bread, distribute the food themselves, and clean after meals. The work keeps them busy. After breakfast, prisoners may go to work if they choose to. Some make garden furniture, others weave protective netting. This is the work Alik chose. It helps him pass the long days in isolation and allows him to earn some money, which he can spend in the prison shop.
We leave in the morning, work until lunch, and then again until 3 p.m. Then we can have some tea, sit down and watch TV.
The prison life does not seem heavily guarded. Some prisoners work in large halls overseen by only a few guards. Others train with makeshift gym equipment or sit in the rooms. They have access to a library and a large yard. It is a hot day in late August, and everyone seeks shade. The complex is quiet and orderly. Ukrainian authorities allow journalists into the camp once a month. There are no guards in the interview room. It's just me, a table, and the prisoner. But talking to POWs is ethically complicated. Their treatment is regulated by the 1949 Geneva Conventions, and its implementation overseen by the International Committee of the Red Cross, a humanitarian organization mandated to protect victims of armed conflict, including prisoners. Pat Griffith, an ICRC spokesperson in Kiev, explained to me the ethics of such interviews.
Very specifically, there's an article that says that prisoners of war are protected from exposure to something called public curiosity. So we read that as media reporting. So for us, that means when talking or interviewing prisoners of war, just not revealing their identities. And that's for reasons of their safety and also for their dignity, but also the safety of their families back home. So very much in practice, I guess that means not showing faces and not using full names is probably our recommendation of a best practice to apply.
Importantly, by law, prisoners of war cannot renounce these protections, even if they say they want to.
In a state essentially of coercion, it's very hard, if not impossible, for them to make a free decision when talking on this topic. It's very hard for them to give free consent to interview, to speak with a journalist.
So, for Alik's safety, I'm not disclosing his full name or his photograph.
Keep privacy.
In the camp, I am welcomed by Petro Yasenko, the young, friendly press secretary of the coordination headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war. His English is perfect, and his Polish exceptionally good. We walk through the corridors, see the bathing area and bedrooms. Everything looks clean. We eat lunch prepared by the prisoners. The food is simple, but filling. I ask Yatsenko if he has seen many Central Asians during his visits to the POW camps.
About the Central Asians, it's not a large amount because, of course, fact to be imprisoned, it's not depends the total amount of these guys on the front line. It's just an occasion. So we have a couple of them.
He said that I can speak to some of them. And soon after, the guards brought two men, one from Tajikistan and one from Uzbekistan. I asked each of them if they wanted to be interviewed. Both of them declined. In accordance with the Geneva Conventions, I did not proceed. Then the guards brought Alik.
Salam alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
We sit in a small room across from each other, just the two of us, a table and two chairs. Alik looks tense. He has given interviews before, but has not grown used to speaking about his life to strangers.
Меня зовут Авазбек. Алик меня зовут.
Alik.
Да.
Вы из Узбекистана?
Я из Киргизстана.
Alik speaks heavily accented, broken Russian, a language he learned over the years of living and working in Russia. He first went there in 2009, seeking better pay and opportunities for his family. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, newly independent Central Asian states struggled economically. Small towns and villages were particularly affected. With Soviet factories and collective farms shutting down one by one, unemployment soared, pushing people to migrate. Russia, the former imperial center, became the obvious destination. Like many of his compatriots, Alik initially traveled seasonally and returned periodically to rest in the familiar comfort of his home village. In 2022, he moved to Turkey, but 2 years later decided to settle in Russia permanently, taking with him his wife, Nargiza, and their 3 sons. Until recently, his life resembled that of many Central Asian migrant workers. He worked as a taxi driver and a security guard in the city of Khabarovsk, more than 8,000 kilometers east of Moscow, near the Chinese border. He worked hard to support his family.
Я Россия, это жена мы работали.
I worked in Russia with my wife because there were no jobs in Kyrgyzstan. I came here, I worked as a taxi driver, and my wife worked in a store. My documents were in order. I had a residence permit for a year, propiska. I lived legally, paid taxes, worked every day. I was doing well.
Работал каждый день. Мне все хорошо было. Так.
Alik insists that life was good. But the reality for most Central Asian migrants in Russia is more complex. This is what Natalia Sadikova, a Kazakh journalist based in Ukraine who has extensively covered Central Asians fighting in Russian forces, told me.
Ну, кто-то из них признается, что их, да, к ним плохо относились в России.
Some of the Central Asian fighters admit that they were treated poorly in Russia, that they were discriminated against. But there are also those, quite a few, who say that life in Russia is wonderful, and that's why they need a Russian passport, that no one discriminates against them.
Не относятся к ним плохо, и все у них прекрасно.
She recalls being called various racist slurs as a child whenever she visited her grandma in Russia.
Я сама сталкивалась с этой дискриминацией.
I experienced discrimination myself. I grew up in multicultural Kazakhstan, where in school we had Kazakhs, Russians, Ukrainian, Koreans, Germans. I've never judged people by their nationality. And when I encountered this in Russia as a child, I was shocked, of course. And it hasn't gone anywhere. We see it on social media all the time.
Мы же видим это все и по социальным сетям, и по другим вещам.
Migrant discrimination in Russia includes racial profiling, arbitrary police checks, raids, and xenophobic attacks. According to a Human Rights Watch report published in March, after the 2024 Crocus City Hall attack, attributed to Central Asians, harassment worsened. Kyrgyz citizens, like Alik, are members of the Eurasian Economic Union and do not need patents. Special work permits required from Uzbeks and Tajiks. But this does not shield them from exploitation. Many still work informally without contracts or protections, left vulnerable to extortion, deportation, and abuse. But despite challenges, millions continue to migrate. According to the 2025 report by the International Center for Migration Policy Development, about 3 million Central Asians live and work in Russia at any given time. Remittances form a significant share of GDP. Around 45% in Tajikistan, 24% in Kyrgyzstan, and 14% in Uzbekistan. And conditions have worsened. In 2024, Russia created a registry of controlled persons, restricting access to key services. Some migrants on the list had bank accounts blocked. Police gained expanded powers to deport migrants without a court order, and 86,000 foreign nationals were detained and deported in the first half of 2024, double the previous year. New regional bans restrict migrant employment in sectors such as education, transport, catering, and public services. Migrants from visa-free countries, which include Central Asian states, must install the Amina app, which tracks their location. Failure to do so can result in being listed as a controlled person. Recent rules also require foreign children to prove Russian language proficiency to attend public school. As life became more restrictive, many migrants considered applying for Russian citizenship. In September 2022, amid an urgent need for new recruits for the war in Ukraine, the Russian parliament passed a law allowing foreigners who serve at least 1 year in the Russian army to apply for citizenship. But there were harsher methods to convince Central Asians to join the war effort too. According to Yatsenko, many were coerced.
The majority of Central Asia's mercenaries are being tricked by Russians because their main intention is to go to Russia to work, to earn money, to provide some money to their families. And of course, Russia uses that and tries to trick them, to force them to sign a contract or to push them to sign a contract with Russian army. And of course, majority of them don't want to go to this very far and very unknown for them war. But the general thing is they were promised to earn a lot of money, up to $2,000 and even more per month. And of course, they promise in the Russian citizenship, or they can promise them that they will not be thrown to the very front line, but they will work like in the far from the front line regions in Russian army. So they're trying to trick them in different ways.
Natalia Sadikova agrees.
Большинству из них говорят, там, будете где-то на вспомогательных работах, говорят, что вы там даже в Украину не поедете.
Most of them say they are told to do a kind of support work, that they won't even go to Ukraine, that they will be in some unit in the Rostov region. They're being lied to at every turn to force them to sign this contract. Most of these people don't watch Russian television because they don't watch any.
Что им некогда, они заняты тем, что выживают.
Many Central Asians are drawn by the promise of citizenship.
У них в России нет никаких прав.
It's because they have no rights in Russia anyway. They are second-class citizens there, holding passports from their home countries. And they all believe that the Russian passport will give them more opportunities.
Устроиться на работу, получить какие-то преференции для себя.
Alik tells me his story. He says the Khabarovsk police tricked him into going to war. A few years earlier, he had purchased a fake driver's license. A mistake, he admits. Earlier this year, after he was involved in a car accident, the police discovered the forgery.
Мне потом это сказали, или поедешь на Украину.
They told me, either go to Ukraine or we'll arrest you. I chose to come here. The car that hit me cost a fortune. It was my fault, and I didn't have the insurance. I don't have this kind of money. I work hard. I have 3 children. I have to pay for our flat. I had no choice, so I came here.
Мне деньги нету, сам работать пришел, 3 детям, квартира платить, это. Я всех сторон меня закрыто был, я сюда собрался.
Yet, he admits that citizenship was a major motivation.
Вот как паспорт получаем, если это чуть-чуть это будет.
My sons need documents. They go to boxing training, and they're told, you can't go, you're not citizens. That's why I came, for the passport.
Ты другое гражданство. За это я, за паспорт я пришел.
His wife opposed the decision, but it was too late. On 28th of April 2025, he arrived at a training camp near the Ukraine border. After 15 days, he was sent to the front. Ever since, he called his wife only 3 times from other people's phones. His own was confiscated by his Russian commander. After seeing what war was like, he called her one last time to say goodbye. A few days later, around 2 months into the fighting, he was captured.
Это не город, меня какой-то это деревню взяли, это.
They captured me in some village around Kharkiv. I don't know. I'd never been to Ukraine. I arrived there that night. They sent us to the forest. I saw everything. When we wanted to withdraw, the drones came. They threw a grenade at us. I lost consciousness. I bled a lot. When I opened my eyes, I was already captured.
Я в плен попал. Не знаю я. Я когда глаза открыл, меня уже взяли.
When I ask what he knew about the war in Ukraine before joining the army, Alik says that not that much.
Идет, слышал, такая война, это дроном, камикадзем, бабайкам, такой война.
I heard that there's a war going on. A war with drones, kamikaze drones. But I didn't imagine it would be like that. People are dying. I didn't imagine that. It stinks up there. Corpses lying around. They should be buried. Flies and worms are eating them.
Воняет. Скушать муху. Червей все.
Alik was wounded, and the Ukrainians took him to the hospital. When he recovered, they transferred him to the Lviv camp. When we met in late August, he was there for less than 2 months. He regrets joining the Russian forces, he says. He still has no citizenship, his bank card with his salary was confiscated by the Ukrainians, and his wife is left alone with 3 sons. He wrote her a letter, but doesn't know if she received it. To better understand motivations of people joining the Russian army, I spoke to Lukpan Akhmedyarov, a Kazakh journalist and YouTuber. He describes 3 waves of Central Asians joining the war.
Это, собственно, с марта 2022 года и, наверное,
The first one began in March 2022 and continued until autumn that year. These are mostly people who went on their own initiative, including some from Kazakhstan. These were people who supported Putin and his war. They really believed they were going there to fight the fascists.
бороться с фашистами, с нацистами якобы. Потом вторая волна — это были люди, которые поехали в
Then the second wave consisted of people who were also subject to Russian propaganda. But that wasn't enough to drive them to war. Money was. Russian propaganda began actively exploiting this theme, that everyone who went to war would receive several million Russian rubles, that the war will end quickly and you'll come back with money. And then from the end of 2023, the beginning of 2024, and to this day, there is the third wave. These are those who went to war under duress, deception.
Это те, кто попал на войну под принуждением, обманом, особенно вот из стран Центральной Азии.
Methods of coercion include fabricated criminal charges and physical intimidation. Alik, who says he was coerced, regrets everything.
Я по-другому, я сюда первый не приехал бы, возле семьи не вышел бы, я такого не...
I would never have come here. I would never have left my family if I knew what it was like. I saw so many corpses, so many lives lost.
Видел. Сколько трупов лежит, я видел. Глазами видел.
When I left the camp, I wondered what will happen to these Central Asian men who invaded Ukraine along the Russians. Whether they came voluntarily or were coerced. Under the Geneva Conventions, prisoners of war remained detained until the end of the war. Some are exchanged. But Alik said none of the Central Asians he met had been. A Tajik prisoner who has been imprisoned since 2023 said that so far no Central Asian had been exchanged. Yatsenko confirmed a few had made it to the exchanges, but not many. Sadikova believes Central Asians are not a priority for Russia.
Но в целом граждане Центральной Азии России не нужны.
Russia doesn't need citizens of Central Asia. They don't include them in exchange lists. They have no interest in taking them back. They prioritize their own citizens, Russians by nationality, whom they return as part of these exchanges.
Которых они возвращают в рамках этого обмена.
Those who are not claimed back by Russia have limited options. Returning home to Central Asia may mean prosecution for mercenarism, though in Uzbekistan, judges are lenient, often giving house arrest or non-custodial sentences. According to the Kun Uz Daily, one man received a 5-year prison sentence, similar to mercenaries tried in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. Leaving Ukraine, I feel torn. People like Alik, shaped by poverty and limited opportunities, often cannot choose freely. Migration becomes a necessity, and vulnerability exposes them to coercion. They seek better lives for their children, but rarely escape marginalization. At the same time, Alik did enter Ukraine, a former Soviet republic once seen as a brotherly nation. When asked what he thought about the war, he shrugged, saying he didn't know. He had no time to watch the news. When asked whether he killed anyone, he claimed he only saw drones. Perhaps true, but I feel he wasn't telling the full story. A few days after our meeting, I decided to contact his family. His wife, Nargiza, still didn't know that he had been captured. I recorded her a message on Telegram, the messaging app popular in Russia. Nargiza doesn't speak Russian, so I spoke to her oldest son, 16-year-old Bek.
А вы там папу там на видео снимали или брали у него интервью? Есть какое-нибудь видео?
Можно оправ?
They were grateful that I got in touch and agreed to answer my questions. Since Russia restricted voice and video calls on Telegram in August this year, as they claimed to counter criminal activities, we exchanged voice notes.
Конечно, это было плохое решение. Не надо было идти туда.
Of course it was a bad decision. He shouldn't have gone there. When we found out he'd been captured, we were worried. Mum even started crying. We don't know what they do to them in captivity, that's why. Do you know how they treat him there? Since he left, due to financial problems, things have gotten a little worse. Bad, you could say. But my uncle helps us out, and my mum is working, and I'll start earning money soon too. So that's how it is. Things have changed for the worse. My mum, my uncle and I work in the meat department. You could say we're butchers. I always help out at my uncle's place, and Khabarovsk is good. I don't want to leave. I already have friends here. I've made some over the past 3 years, so everything is just fine here.
Здесь у меня уже друзья есть, за 3 года уже накопились. Так что все здесь четко.
Bek says that they have not received any money from the state. Alik was meant to transfer his salary to Nargiza's bank account when he got the chance, but the bank card is now gone. They also don't know if they would receive citizenship.
Ну, мама его уговаривала, даже плакала там, все эти дела были.
My mum tried to persuade him, cried and all that stuff. But as they say, a person does his own thing. They bought him a bus ticket on Saturday. On Sunday he said goodbye. By Monday he was already flying out.
Ну, чисто так погуляли, попрощались, а в понедельник уже улетел.
I asked whether Alik had any links to Ukraine. He did not. And then Bek told something that stunned me.
Он просто хотел паспорт получить, вот поэтому ушел.
And then he just wanted to get a passport. So he went. He thought the war was a piece of cake at first. And of course we're upset and wanted to keep him. We tried to talk him out of it, but he's too stubborn. So he went.
И вот, как-то так.
I double-checked with Bek. So, his father was never blackmailed by the Russian police? There was no fake license ultimatum? No arrest threat? Bek confirms.
Ну вот с мамой, с папой хотели включить VPN, они зашли в это приложение, а там вышла реклама. Ну, мол...
Mum and Dad wanted to turn on the VPN. They went into the app and an ad popped up. It said, "You can go to war." There was a number. They called it and found out that Dad could go to war. He was overjoyed and signed up. Of course, no one forced him. He went there for us. He wanted us to go to a military school, and to get there, you need citizenship. So you could say he went to get the citizenship for us.
Можно сказать, что он пошел получить гражданство для нас.
I don't know why Alik lied. Did he think that telling me he wanted the Russian passport would make him look worse than telling a fake driver's license story? Or did he hope that appearing as a victim would help him in captivity? I will never know. To make sense of it, I speak to Daniel Berger, the director of Someone Else's War. a documentary released last year. It follows the families of 2 Kyrgyzstanis who died in the first days of the full-scale invasion. They both joined the army voluntarily and had Russian citizenship, but were born and raised in Kyrgyzstan.
Я провел с этими семьями год, даже больше, наверное, года полтора, снимая их.
I spent a year with these families, probably a year and a half, filming them, filming the anniversary of their sons' deaths. I went with them to the cemetery. I literally lived with them. The thought that's haunted me is that these guys might still be alive if the economic situation in Kyrgyzstan had started improving 10 years ago. Their parents wouldn't have gone away to work, and then they wouldn't have been drafted into the Russian army. The second thought that couldn't leave me was that we need to develop the Kyrgyz language and Kyrgyz culture in Kyrgyzstan, because this is what makes a country truly independent. We need to understand that we aren't just a former colony or some sort of underbelly of Russia.
Это не бывшая колония, это не какое-то, есть такое выражение, подбрюшье России.
Berger has begun to see a light at the end of the tunnel.
С момента прекращения существования Советского Союза прошло почти 35 лет.
Almost 35 years have passed since the fall of the Soviet Union. And in my memory, this is the first period when we are finally beginning to see ourselves as an independent country. We must rely on our own strength. No one will give us any recipe for happiness. But for this, the economy is secondary. The first is self-awareness. We need to see ourselves as an independent, strong country, where people can live comfortably and safely without having to leave for work. And I feel that time is coming.
И им не придется никуда уезжать на заработки. Вот, да, я чувствую, что мы становимся независимыми.
Thank you for listening to this audio feature by Turan Tales. It was produced by me, Agnieszka Pikulicka, and the master of sound, Eva Dunal. Tomek Stankiewicz from Tostanki supported the sound design. Amalia Ibushewa composed the music, and Joe Barnes assisted with the voiceover. Finally, thanks to the International Press Institute for their grant, which made this production possible. If you like our work, please support us on Substack at turantales.substack.com/subscribe. Thank you. Until next month.